Right, thanks for staying with us. The World Population Day is around, and this is to draw attention on the importance of population issues. It's an annual event observed with various events to tackle population-related issues. Right, with me in the studio tonight to discuss these issues are members of the Population Advisory Group for the implementation of the National Population Policy for Sustainable Development, the National Population Commission, NPC. Let me first welcome to this program Ambassador Usman Sarki, a former Deputy Permanent Representative of Nigeria to the United Nations, who's also a member of the Population Advisory Group of the National Population Commission. Thanks for being here, Ambassador Usman Sarki. It's good to see you. It's been a while now.
Quite so. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Let me also welcome Dr. Ejike Oji, Chairman, Management Committee, Association for the Advancement of Family Planning. It's a CSO focal point, FB 2030. Good to have you. It's also been a long time.
Long time, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And joining us tonight also is Margaret Edison, Director, Department of Population Management and Development of the National Population Commission. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me here.
Okay. Let's go straight to the issues. Of course, the World Population Day, usually the 11th of July, right? And there's an upcoming World Population Day. Let's start from the premise of the theme for this year, Pastor Sarki.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. You remember 30 years ago, the International Conference on Population and Development took place in Cairo, Egypt. And since then, population has become a central issue to the development program and projects of the United Nations and its member states. And a lot of the issues regarding population or demographics center around not only population control, birth control and things like that, but the emphasis on population and development. So the theme for the population report and population commemoration for this year will be in terms of the sustainability of the population programs related to the achievements of the 2015 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and their implementation. So the critical hub or nexus between population and development is what is being explored in these projects and programs. And I'm sure, when we discuss the details from the perspectives of the National Population Commission, we are going to have some ideas about the local strategies that we are following here, in Nigeria. Our advisory group, as you know, works with the National Population Commission to advise on the implementation of the national policy, the revised national policy on population and sustainable development, and advising the federal government on funding strategies, implementation strategies, and so forth. So it is quite a hectic, period on population matters.
Let me just come in here at this point in time to expand this further. When you speak about population, especially the world over, one of the things that people tend to want to look at is first the demographics, where you have predictions of the world's population rising to such levels as in some parts of the world, there are concerns about population rising to unmanageable levels here.
Yes. According to the population clock, the mechanical instrument counting population births, at least every day, the world's population increases by around 290,000 persons every day. So that is a huge number. Every day, the world's population increases by nearly 300,000 people. So the concern is very real, is very genuine. And in Nigeria here, because of the way the population is not managed properly in terms of controls and management, the population is expected to reach between 400 and 500 million by 2050. That's the projection. And the interesting thing is that the land surface of Nigeria does not increase. So you have to plan for feeding such numbers. You have to plan for housing such numbers. You have to plan for providing shelter, food, transportation, infrastructure, water, sanitation, healthcare, education. So it's going to be a long-term, plan to sustain and manage such a huge increase, in population. And it is a very complex situation that is facing us. And the Population Advisory Group is very active in terms of, because it aggregated a number of expertise, different areas of specialization, to advise the federal government on what to do before we reach the tipping point. So it's very critical that the federal government actually pays attention to the work of the National Population Commission. And I'm very happy that the President and the Vice President are concerned, because they have received the staff of the National Population Commission, the chairman, and members of the commission to discuss, the issue of population and demography. And as you know, the foreign policy of Nigeria today, under this administration, demography is one of the 4 Ds. So this is the trend we are going towards.
All right, and let's come to Dr. Ejikeoji as the Chairman Management Committee. Let's hear you on these issues, population and development.
Yes, just like His Excellency had mentioned, for some of us who've been saying for more than 2 or 3 decades now that we need to look at our population based on what was going on, especially after ICPD 30 years ago. And then at that time, the world population was galloping, and countries came together and felt that if they allowed the population of the world to continue the way it was going to be disastrous. And then said that we should try and bring down the fertility rate to about 2.5. In 2019, we were all in Nairobi. That was 25 years after. And the world now looked at how far have they gone. And it was found out that globally the fertility rate had come down to about 2.3, 2.5. But coming down locally in Nigeria, we are still at 5.3. So, and then for us, we're looking at what's happening globally, but we are more interested in what's happening in Nigeria. And then if you look at our population structure, the dynamics, 75% of our population as we speak now is below the age of 35. So we have a youthful bulge. Now, what does that mean? That youthful bulge, just like you had mentioned, you have to plan for food, for education, for schools, all sorts. And we have dwindling resources, as it were. So, that, if you look at it, that's the first thing you see, that youth bulge. Then the second thing you now see, to tell you that you're in a demographic crisis, you see a lot of immigration. First of all, the ones we call global citizens, they can get a job anywhere in the world because they are properly trained. They start living. After that, unskilled labor. Some time ago, the International Office of Migration said that for every 100 Africans that cross the tempestuous sea, I always like to underline it. Mediterranean Sea is the second most dangerous sea on earth. But people go over it on raft. That will show you how desperate they are to cross over to mainland Europe. For every 100 that was crossing at that point, 14 of them were Nigerians. In 2006, I was at Oslo, Norway, on the invitation of the Norwegian government. They wanted to craft out a policy for Africa, and they invited a few of us to help them. When I sat down with the International Development Minister, the first question he asked me, Dr. Oji, how come every single day 13 commercial sex workers come into their country from Nigeria? But I didn't like that question, but I said to him too, because your men, they have a target there too. But in any case, it sent a message. So that shows there's a high level of immigration. Then the next thing that happens is nationals start killing nationals. Just look at what has happened in Nigeria in the past 20 years. It started with OPC in the southwest because the Yoruba nation felt that they were under attack. They formed a militia group to protect themselves. See what happened in the south-south? The restiveness started with kidnapping of whites or foreigners, eventually came to Africans, Nigerians. In the southeast, you had kidnapping, So much so that some of us that are from the start, for 4 years, we couldn't go to the southeast. Came with religious crisis on the plateau, Boko Haram in the northeast, then banditry in the northwest. So it's gone round. So everywhere is boiling because these young people, he mentioned before, they need all these things. They need food, they need everything. So that means we need to really, really look at the fertility rates. That is what is causing this wahala.
You are aware, aren't you, that in these parts, any talk about management of a population with any semblance of control is a pretty edgy and touchy subject, aren't you?
Yes, I agree with that. And that's why the advocacy in terms of how you talk about it, you go to some climes, you don't say family planning, you say bed spacing. And I always like to mention, the last time we had a National Family Planning Conference, we always have 3 subcommittees, conferences, pre-conferences rather. One of them is interfaith. In that meeting, I told them that the Quran and the Bible, they say any man that cannot take care of his family is worse than an infidel. So that's a guiding principle. We can't continue to just keep having children we can't take care of. People talk about India, they talk about China, they are wealthy. Go check them out. 50 years ago, where were they? Until they looked at their fertility rate. China said 1 person per couple. India said two children per couple. And that's how they were able to motivate. They invested heavily in that population, which is what Nigeria has to do now.
Okay. Well, let's come to Margaret Edison, who's the Director of the Department of Population Management and Development of the National Population Commission. And for you, we'll be looking to you giving us an insight into this sustainable, this population policy for sustainable development from the NPC.
Okay. Thank you very much. I would like to start by saying that what really brought us here today is to talk about what is going to happen in a few hours in Nigeria today. We're already getting into a new day. It's called the State of the World Population Report. It's an annual flagship report published by the United Nations Population Fund. Mm-hmm. And that report comes out annually, and it draws its context from what happened in Cairo in 1994, where 179 countries in the world came together to endorse a document called International Conference on Population and Development Program of Action. And it was in that year that issues of population moved from just the numbers to look at the people themselves. That's why we now discuss population and development. And that informed how population policies were reconstructed, reviewed, revised, and implemented. And to guide all of this, annually, the SWOP report highlights key issues that relates from the numbers to the people, to their welfare, to their quality, and how this contributes to the development of each country and region. 2 years ago, precisely on the 15th of November 2022, the world population clicked 8 billion. And 9 countries contributed to that reach. And thereafter, the United Nations data gave projections how the population of the world was going to grow. And they picked out 8 countries in the whole world that is going to contribute to the next population growth up to 2050. And Nigeria is among the 8 countries. Right. 5 of those countries are in Africa, led by Nigeria. Mm-hmm. Tanzania is there, Egypt is there,
Ethiopia.
sorry?
Ethiopia.
Ethiopia is there, and I think the Congo something.
Right.
Yes.
Big thing
Congo
for us is
DRC.
that Nigeria
Yes, so Nigeria
is leading the pack of
is
those who are going to
leading.
contribute to this.
Yes.
I don't know if we can use the term explosion population.
So the ICPD guides all of this, and the State of the World Population Report highlights some of those things. Like he mentioned, in 2019, we all regathered in Nairobi and said, let's look at the promises we made, particularly to women and girls. How have we fared? And at that meeting, we came up with 3 strategies or transformative agenda, where we committed ourselves to achieving 0 preventable maternal deaths, 0 unmet needs for family planning, 0 harmful practices that are against women and girls. Example, child marriage, female genital mutilation, and all that. And all this, when we came back home as Nigerians, we reviewed our policy to make sure we are able to tie those things into our policy. And we had a government that listened to us and also supported us to make sure we produced that national population policy, which has goals, targets, objectives. And those 3 zeros are inside that policy. So for between now, we're about going to 12 midnight.
Right.
By tomorrow, our vice president and other leaderships in government and civil society and everybody, we are coming together to launch this year's State of the World Population Report.
Right.
And that report looks at regions, look at issues. What are the issues that are affecting humanity? What are the issues that are really affecting, bringing out the extent of inequalities around the world? And how have we met the commitments we all made in Cairo, we all reaffirmed in Nairobi, and we all promised to make towards getting to 2030?
Right. This is all well and good, and this is all a result of extensive research and knowledge. But I like at this point, I'm still staying with you, I like at this point to now find how the National Population Commission, in considering this State of the World Population Report and its population policy, can translate this to the ordinary Nigerian on the street there, whose background all along is just that, look, number one, we hear that all the time, children are a gift from God. That's on one side. And we are all enjoined to procreate and increase our numbers. And for many people, there are deep cultural factors which determine that the larger your family is, the more prominent you are as a citizen. And if I might just chip in, Ambassador Serki would know this saying that is in the north, mostly where they say, "Bakinda Allah etaga, bai hana shi abinci." So if I translate that about that literally, God's creation cannot be starved. How do you translate all this now to bring people to be aware that these are very serious issues that have been discussed?
So I would like to start from the first population policy that Nigeria launched in 1988. At that time, the late Professor Ransom Kuti, I pay tribute to him this night, he was behind that policy. And in that policy, it was during the time of our president, Ibrahim Babangida. And it was stated in that policy that women should not have more than 4 children. And Nigerians did not like it. And that policy was dead on arrival. It was never implemented. I want to draw to what happened recently last year we were called to review a report that some experts conducted some research in Nigeria. And they discovered that even when women get pregnant accidentally, they love their children. That Nigeria is one country in the world that you don't see a woman said, I didn't want this baby. And from Nigeria Demographic Dividend Survey report, it shows that men have higher desire for children than women. And like you mentioned, cultural issues and all that. So if we have a community, a society that accepts children irrespective of how they come from, that's an issue on one side. So as National Population Commission, one of the tools, or we have many other tools, that we use to draw the attention of the public to why we should have a few children that we can take care of. Because one, Nigeria doesn't have a social security system that you said, okay, I can have many children, I can draw from that to take care of my children, train them. We don't have that. And the way the society is transforming, we no longer have that extended family support. You have your brother who is a minister, he will help you train your children. We don't have that again. So it's your own personal responsibility for the number of children that you have. So as National Population Commission, one of the tools we use in engaging and trying to reach out is the population policy itself. And within that context, we have the Population Advisory Group, which advises and also come up with strategies on how we can manage our population. And of all of this, the best way to manage a population is through family planning.
Well.
And one of the caveats around there is that family planning is voluntary. And when something is voluntary, it's not compelling. It takes the person to make a choice.
Okay.
To either have a large family or have small. But we are doing a lot to make people understand that we prefer to have quality over quantity.
Well, this is a place where Ambassador Usman Sariki comes in now, this part.
Well, yes. I think, the idea of population management should not only entail population control or birth control and things like that, but looking at population in its totality, and then the capacity of the state or the government to provide for the population and for the community actually to relate to the level of the population or demography at a given period of time in order to maintain social protection, for instance, to maintain security, and also to carry people along the path of development. Now, if these are not possible to be achieved in the country, then it behoves upon the government and the state to come up with very robust policies to see how management and control measures could be introduced. So here the will of the state and the government and the capacity to induce people to restrict uncontrolled birth is very necessary. The Chinese, when in the 80s, they thought that they are in a very precarious condition, almost overpopulation will become an existential issue. The party and the government, they insisted that there must be the one-child policy, and they rigorously imposed that policy.
That's changing now.
To the point that the population plateau, the graph of the Chinese population reached a plateau where it leveled off. And now, because of the declining, population, they are trying to reverse it to make it 2 or more. So this is in terms of the adjustment to the reality. But here in Nigeria, we are facing two critical obstacles. Number one is religious persuasion, and number two, cultural context, whereby big family, big numbers is the desirable. So here, an appeal has to be made to the people's consciousness in terms of their duty and responsibility to give birth to children that they can manage in terms of upbringing, feeding, education, healthcare, and other things. We have reached a point where the state cannot provide all these things. So it's the responsibility of the community, the family, to do that. So in doing so, you have to manage the numbers. Religious leaders, traditional leaders, cultural figures, and influencers must be brought on board to sensitize the public on the need to restrict the number of persons being born every day, every hour, every minute in the country. And that means a deliberate, robust, and conscious policy must be introduced by the government that will permeate the grassroots in terms of every family being aware of their responsibility in terms of, for instance, early marriages, early childbirth, and things like that. And also in terms of actually being able to provide quality or qualitative health care, maternal health care, child health care, and so forth, whereby the need to have multiple children in the hope that even if some of them pass away, there will be some remaining. So these are the contexts in which I think overpopulation comes.
Of course,
and these are the, Mr. Stober, the linkage between population and development. We have to create that.
I have also heard one or two people who argue on the other side say that the large numbers need not be a disadvantage. Of course, we've explained that when people talk about the large populations of China and India, there are also questions about how Nigeria's population is distributed, and wonder if the problem is actually in the numbers or in the demographic setup.
Yes, it's actually the demographic setup. Remember, I outlined earlier on the youth bulge. And the youth bulge comes from, there's some level of improvement of life. What normally drives population is, regardless of culture and then religion, is that the desire of a woman to have more children because she feels she will lose some. And I think His Excellency made some allusions to that. When you feel if you have 10 children, because of the poor health environment condition, you lose about 5 or 6.
In the old days, they'll say, look, the more you have, the more hands you have
in the farm also. But the major drive is the fact that women feel they have to have more, so that if they lose 5 out of 10, they still have 5. But then, as time moved on, the healthcare, not so wonderful, but got better. So some of those children are not dying the way they were dying, but women were still having. So that's how the population bulge came in. Now, moving forward from that, you were talking about the population, is it something desirable or is not? The most important thing is the fertility rate. The reason is that if you do not cap your fertility rates, you can't plan properly for the future. I always use an example. A man goes out in the morning, he looks into his household, himself, his wife, and 4 children. So he's going to bring back food for 6 people. When he gets back with food for 6 people, he sees 10 people around the table. Now 10 mouths, but he brought back for 6. The next day he said, okay, I now have 10, I'll go for 10. When he comes back the next day, he has 15 or 20. This is exactly what happens in a population like the way it's growing in Nigeria. Now, there are 5 deliberate steps. Even as Nigeria is, as bad as it is, if we take those 5 deliberate steps today, and it's generational, 20 years minimum, Nigeria will be one of the greatest nations in Africa. What are those steps? Number 1, remember, Margaret did say, one of the key things of ICPD is making sure we stop unmet need for family planning. Now, family planning is the number one. No matter what economic this thing you're doing, if you do not cut your fertility rate, it will make nonsense of whatever good efficiency you're putting in. So that's number one. Because family planning happens to be what we call the most strategic purchase in health. It reduces maternal mortality, it reduces infant mortality, it reduces under 5 mortality, and of course it reduces poverty. The second thing is, once you have cut the fertility rate, you must now invest in healthcare to make sure that the children already had will not die and people will have better healthcare. Maternal mortality will not continue. The third thing that happens is you invest in education. This youthful bulge that we have now, you invest massively in it to train them, give them skills and a lot of business sense. Once you do that, the fourth one is ease of doing business. The government must make sure the people you have trained, they can be hired or that they can even hire themselves. And then the last one is what we call equity. And that equity comes with civility, transparency, accountability, justice, fair play. Everybody is happy. Once you do that, and that's what India did. Let me give you an example of India. India, even the private sector was part of what happened in India. In 1970, Tata, you know Tata Motors, is a conglomerate. Tata found out when he was building his factories, there were so many human beings, but he couldn't have any good hands to work in his factories. He founded the Family Planning Foundation of India, 1970. And then he also got 2 of his colleagues to join him. And that's how they brought out the policy for 2 children, 1 couple. So Nigeria can still do it. And I like the way, Ambassador is an excellent good of use of words. he got it rightly. But no matter whether we like it or not, if we continue to say it's not our culture, it's on Nigeria, just look at what's going on in Nigeria now. Let me give you an example. Malawi, in 2017, we were in Malawi for a meeting, focal points on FP 2030. And then they said the country should go and do group work. I said to my Nigerian colleagues, I'm no more in Nigeria, I'm now a Malawian. So I joined the Malawi people to do their country-specific work. And why did I do that? I wanted to know the trick they did. Malawi is a poorer nation than Nigeria, but they had already hit 50% contraceptive prevalence rate. We're still at 12. What did they tell me? They said, Dr. we looked at the data. We looked at the data. So we closed our eyes and our ears to religion, culture. We threw it out of the window and focused on the data. So what did they do? They found out that young people were getting pregnant. So they formed a team of health ministry and education ministry. They visited schools. They'll counsel a girl, even if it's 12 or 13. Once they found out she was sexually active, they give her a method. And I said, didn't you have a pushback? So one woman, they gave the child, a 12-year-old, they put an implant and it was bleeding, so they bandaged it. When she got home, the mother said, why are you bleeding? Did you fall? She said, no, they forced me to give me family planning. But the woman had a phone call away to the minister. So she called the minister. So you people are now forcing our children to have. Okay. So she invited them the next day, invited all the teams. When they brought them out into the minister's meeting room, they asked the girl, is it true? The girl now said no, that she was not forced because the principal was there. That's how they were achieving what they are doing. Malawi is going to 55 almost now.
Okay, well, let's return to Margaret Edison. At this point in time, yeah, it's, I guess, a little bit warmer now. It's quite cool in the studio, but you must be a little warmer now. But I'm looking at what Dr. Ejikeoji has just said. With a large youth population, the young people, and again, from the other side, we might say, but this is the segment you require most for development because they have all the energy now. If you're thinking of an aging population, may not be nearly as strong as they used to work towards developing the nation, but the huge numbers you have who are young, driven, have a lot of energy in them. And that's the segment you need mostly. Shouldn't that be the one you should be targeting to have greater numbers or engage in development?
Yes. We have a handful of them. And the only way, like I said, moving from quantity to quality, we can have a large number, but what sort of investments are we making in them? If we invest in those young people, they'll become an asset rather than liability to us. In their education, he mentioned education, in their health, in creating jobs when they come out of school. And the world is dynamic, particularly the labor market, the global labor market is very dynamic. Technology is changing. Now we're talking about the AI, innovation, creativity all over the place. So we can make use of that large number if we make a decision, and we are committed to that, to invest in their lives. Like we individually have invested in our children, make sure they go to universities, learn the best of subjects and issues, and come out and become useful to us as parents. If we can transit that from household to the society, to the government, to invest in that large number of young people, then we will have peace, we will have prosperity, we will have progress for our nation. So it has to do with human capital development, moving from human resource to human capital. And in between is the word development. Development is education. What kind of education? Particularly the girl child's education. When a girl is educated, the issue of family planning will not be difficult for them to practice. When they go to school, they will make choices when they would like to marry, the number of children they would like to have. They will think of how to space those children. And that is where family planning becomes relevant. So for me, the number one thing to do is to educate our children, particularly the girl child. Like the Vice President remarked today when we were with him, that if we can give a girl child at least the minimum of completion of secondary school, then we have achieved. Then that girl will become an asset to the nation.
Okay. Well, Ambassador, let's return to you. And from what's been said here,
Yes.
there are about 8 countries that will impact this huge population that we're talking about. And out of those 8, 5
will be in Africa.
in
And Nigeria
Africa,
is leading the pack.
Nigeria is leading the pack.
Yes,
So
yeah.
it tells me that
Yes.
there's a lot to do with Africa, the continent,
Yeah.
and these issues. But again, you look at the other side and say, by the time you begin to expand this discussion, again, you look at so many conspiracy theories
Yeah.
to say the West has always thought that Africa would be a threat to its own existence.
Yeah.
And you find it across, even in medicine. You hear people say there's a deliberate ploy
Yeah.
to cut down this potential giant of a continent that will eventually
Yes.
take over the world.
Yeah.
And how do you navigate through these
Yes,
theories?
it's very interesting, Mr. Stober. I remember in, I think, 1995 or thereabouts, when this disease polio came and these drops they give, is it vaccine? Not there was something they give for polio to babies. It was a huge controversy, especially in the northern parts, that this medicine actually is to prevent, children when they grow up, it makes them infertile. So there was a huge campaign around that until it took the involvement of the Organization of Islamic Conference at that time, OIC, and some Islamic states, including Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and others, to really invite our scholars and speak to them that the scientific evidence proves that this is the best way to prevent polio. And Nigeria was actually leading the world in terms of the disease, and we are spreading. Even new variants are coming out. So education, like Margaret says, is very important, and sensitization. At the same time, I think there must be transparency in the discussion and also in crafting a policy around population issues. Once we know that these are controversial issues, very sensitive issues, then the government, civil society, and other stakeholders, including international partners, must take into cognizance this sensitivity, whether it's cultural or religious or customary or whatever, into consideration while crafting policy. Doctor has referred to the importance of data. How accurate is the data being churned out in Nigeria in terms of population? We are speaking about the youth bulge. We are speaking about the out-of-school children, and so forth. But do we know exactly, approximately, to a very reasonable degree, the numbers involved, apart from hypothesizing over this?
In fact, the population on the general scale is also controversial.
Exactly, it's controversial. 220, are we 220 million or less or more?
Or less or more.
So it's really important that the idea of population, counting the numbers, households, and at the same time, crafting policies on population and development are made central to the decisions being made in the government. That means the executive that is driving the discussions and policy on health care, education, and so forth on population should also work with the National Assembly, state governments, local governments to carry everybody. And the contribution of academia and civil society and international partners like the UNFPA are very critical in terms of sharpening the focus of policy and establishing empirical basis on which we can project to plan for the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. In fact, when you are making decisions on population, it has to be long-term. It has to be generational, like Doctor says, 20 to 25 years. And you stick to those. When in 1986, I remember when I first went to Australia on my first posting as a young foreign service officer, virtually the daily reports on Radio Australia, the Federal Broadcasting Service, was on Nigeria, and particularly on the population crisis. In 1986, when the introduction of four-child policy was made, it became a very big issue internationally. In Australia, virtually every day, there are discussions by experts on the desirability of the policy and how it's going to be sustained. And unfortunately, 40 years later, if we had maintained that policy, we would not be talking about population problems today. We would perhaps be talking about population quality. But today we are concerned about the numbers. And not only the numbers, but the deteriorating physical, material condition of the numbers. And that is a very worrying trend that must make every Nigerian to sit up, to consider as an enlightened self-interest possibility of really controlling this galloping, exponential rise in population, to discuss how, when, and for what purpose that we should control this population in order to bring about qualitative and sustainable development and peace and security in this country.
Dr. Ojo, sometimes in fixing a challenge, you could encounter a dark side or a downside as well. And as the benefits of fertility, birth control, are being propounded, how do you and where do you draw the line to ensure that you do not inadvertently slip into a situation where promiscuity becomes increased?
Yes, I think His Excellency did mention some conspiracy theories. This is one of them, Cyril. The Nigerian Demographic Health Survey has already showed, without saying population family plan on it, that the age of sexual debut is 15 years in Nigeria. So whether you are doing family planning or not doing it, they're already having sex. And that's where we have a problem. Now, before abortion-related deaths came down a little bit in the country, 60% of all the people who die from unsafe abortion complications were adolescents. Most of them unmarried adolescents. So the issue of family planning or not does not in any way encourage promiscuity. This thing has shown it, research has shown it. And then I give you a simple research they did in America in the 80s. They provided family planning to some young people and provided, and then some people went on abstinence only. 10 years later, they went to check. They found out there were more pregnancies in the abstinence only group. So they're already having sex, so to speak. But the important thing is to make sure you educate them. If you must have it, you must have protection. And then the other thing in terms of what do we do and how do we look at our population, I did mention data. And that's why I will encourage our new government of hope, the renewed hope. The most important ingredient for planning anywhere in the world is data. So the census that the National Population Commission has started, I'm pleading that the government should focus and make sure it happens this year. The last time we had a census was in 2006. So all we've been doing, like Ambassador said, we've been, it's not guesswork, it's estimation. Either 2.7% today or 3.2%.
Give or take.
Give or take. So we
you have the challenge of
a
planning
national
effectively.
count. In fact, for us that are working in international development space, at some point, I started fighting my colleagues because UNFPA will bring their own data, WHO will bring their own data, and then we have a demographic health survey. And for us that are advocates, you go to somebody like Cyril now, you are a professor on almost every field. People come here to meet you. They will come and tell you that CPR is 12. But somebody from WHO had already told you before that it was 15. And somebody from the other place had told you it's 12, or 19 rather. So either you choose the one you want, especially when you're going to talk to political leaders, they will choose the one that they feel that will make them look better. So data is sacrosanct in making, and the only way we can get credible data is for us to do a national count. That will help us now plan.
All right. And disaggregate data in terms of the different components of the population.
Of the population.
Yeah, right. Very important.
Very important.
Well, and I think it's on that note we'll have to leave this conversation. This report is to be launched later today. It's past midnight already. So we look forward to taking it up from that level. For now, I have to thank our guests who have been here. Ambassador Usman Sarki, former Deputy Permanent Representative to the United Nations and a member of the Population Advisory Group of the National Population Commission. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Dr. Eji Kyoji, Chairman, Management Committee Association for the Advancement of Family Planning, CSO Focal Point, FP 2030. We'd like to thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. And thank you also to Margaret Edison, Director, Department of Population Management and Development, National Population Commission. We thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you very much. I'll end by saying that I think it's important that, as my senior colleagues have said, that we should give priority to conducting the next census on one side, and also to increase investment and commitment to educate the Nigerian child, particularly the girls.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And that's our program today. We thank you for watching. Next week, we'll be back with NTA Tuesday Live. I'm Cyril Stober. Bye for now.